Welcome back, and thank you for listening to the Abu Dhabi Transparency House, coming to you live from Abu Dhabi, of course, here at the Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week. We are talking with Gus. Welcome, Gus.
Thank you.
You are from EY,
Yes.
and if I understand correctly, you're a partner for the climate change and sustainability services in the region of North Africa and Middle East.
Yes,
I'm correct?
correct.
Okay, so tell me something about this, because I only know EY from being an accounting or a taxation company who does consultancy. So what brings you to sustainability?
Yes, thank you. It's a common perception that the big four only do accountancy and tax work, but actually most of them have been focusing also on sustainability consulting and also sustainability assurance for about 20 or 25 years. Since the mid-'80s, there have always been businesses and governments that have started to focus on sustainability matters. And when we talk about sustainability, we mean three things typically: social, environmental, and economic impact. So everything other than the normal financial statements or results that typically the markets or investors are interested in. What we've seen since the 1980s is more and more businesses beginning to realize that there is value that they should be focusing on an environmental, economic, or social point of view that they're missing if they're only focusing on the financial statements. A very simple example: you can always manipulate financial numbers to look good, but what's the cost of doing that if you're not measuring the socio-economic or environmental impact of that? And as the world becomes smaller, in the sense that globalization has spread and more businesses are sort of rubbing up against each other and the resources are becoming scarce, you can't carry out these tricks anymore to make your numbers look good.
So how do you actually make the numbers work? What does your consultancy mean if you're talking about the environmental impact, corporate responsibility?
Yeah. So a very simple example is if you think back to the 1980s, before there was the internet, you had business. There was, of course, business and everyone was making money and trade was happening, but there was no internet. The internet then arrived, and I remember, I was working at the time, businesses looked at the internet and they looked at their normal way of doing business, and many of them said, well, should I do this new thing, or is it just going to be a fad and it's going to disappear? Business has always worked. You know, we're a 100-year-old company, and we'll continue to do business. The ones that adopted the internet and integrated it into their business are the ones that are winning today. The ones that didn't adopt it are the losers today, and some have gone out of business. Sustainability is very similar, because sustainability touches the whole business in the same way that the internet does. So a better word, or a better collection of words in my mind around sustainability, is to say better business rather than sustainability, because sustainability as a word means different things to different people, and in some cases it means the wrong thing. So think better business, and therefore what I do is I help you run your business in a better way.
So can you give an example of what a better way is?
So a better way would be to begin with that your business strategy includes non-financial elements instead of just financial elements. So it's not just about increasing profit by 20, 30% every year, revenue, etc. It's about growing the business holistically as a business, but then also the community around your business that your business is reliant on to be successful. Because if you treat your suppliers badly, or you pollute the community where your facilities are, you're destroying the environment that allows you to be successful. So it's taking a more holistic view of the business and ensuring that your strategy includes that, so that every decision that you make going forward takes the bigger picture into account.
So can I assume that you're then doing strategy consultancy based on their KPIs, so to say? And then what is the actual difference that you bring? Because you're a consultant, so
Yep.
Why do they need you? Why can't they do this themselves?
Well, as a topic, it's fairly new. The whole environmental agenda is fairly new. It's been around for 25 years roughly. I mean, it's existed before then, but really business has only woken up and engaged with it probably in the last 10 years or so, 10, 15 years. As a result, most people in management in companies don't have the experience or the knowledge, or as human beings, we're very reluctant to change. So you've been successful by following a certain approach and a certain pattern in your business.
Thank you.
Every year it's delivered results. Why should you change? And I'm telling you, you need to change. So sometimes you need someone from the outside also to come to act as a change agent to help you create the arguments within your company to enable change to be made. And if I come as a subject matter and I can provide the evidence and I can listen to your strategy and your business and show how this fits alongside it, it doesn't disrupt it, but it enhances it. Having someone from the outside come and tell you that story is sometimes more powerful than trying to do it from within the company.
Okay, so you are responsible for the area or region of the Middle East.
Yes.
How does that message come across? Do they, for instance, take a leading role in this, or are they more following?
The region is probably one of the most difficult ones to push this message in, and that's why I'm here. I like a challenge, and also because it has the greatest opportunity for results. The region, as many people will know, has been built on oil and gas revenues. If you go back 50 years, there was nothing. There were tents in the desert. So everything that you see today owes its nature to oil and gas. As a result, the whole region, the mentality, the way people do business, is built on that understanding of money coming from oil.
But now
and
we
it
are
works.
here at the Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week.
I agree.
So it might also mean that your message is no longer needed in that sense.
Well, it's always needed. I mean, even in Europe, there's still a need for people to push this message. When we talk about this region, we do need to identify that countries are at different points in their journey. And this is a journey. It's just like moving from a developing to a developed country status. It's a journey. Countries in the Gulf region, and also the Middle East more widely, are all at different stages in that journey. The reason you've got an Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week here in the UAE is that 10 years ago, the rulers of the UAE set out a vision that they wanted the UAE to be sustainable in all aspects and not just some aspects. And they invested a huge amount of money to start running this event and attract people to bring knowledge and know-how to the region. I did a huge project here in the UAE which looked at green growth. How could we convert the whole economy of the UAE to turn it into a much greener form of economic growth rather than just relying on oil barrels, being sold overseas.
Can you give an example of what the outcome was?
Well, the findings were that by introducing certain government policies, by bringing available technologies, by changing calculations that are used for return on investments, by doing proper business cases and measuring non-financial indicators, you actually change the focus of business and where money gets invested going forward.
So can you give an example of how that became successful? Because I can imagine that
Yes.
in the end, money pays the world. So
Yeah, exactly. So, a very simple example which is has happened over the last couple of years is in the area of solar. Solar PV, for example. Some of the cheapest prices in the world for public tenders for solar projects have been achieved here in the UAE. Why? Because the utilities here have gone out to the market and they've said, look, we've got fantastic sunshine. We know the technology exists. We're a government organization, so you have a good off-taker. Bid for a huge project, 800 megawatts, a gigawatt, etc., which hadn't been seen elsewhere in the world. It's happened, it's been delivered at a price that's made everybody else sit up and go, wow, how did they do that? And the result is the price around the world now is going down for other similar PV projects as well.
But there's also a lot of things said about the sustainable energy sources, namely being subsidized heavily.
Well, energy prices are subsidized heavily, not sustainable energy prices. The existing infrastructure that is in place at the moment, in the UAE, for example, it's mainly gas, okay, which is already less polluting than oil. Okay, other countries in the region burn oil for electricity. Those energy prices are subsidized, and that's a huge issue, but this region is not alone. There's energy subsidies in all countries around the world. It's what's been built up over the last 80 years. Companies have been very successful to lobby government to put policies into place to get incentives. I think it works out to $15 million a minute around the world if you add it all up. That's a huge amount, which creates a distorted playing field for anything which is renewable or more sustainable or more efficient. And people like that. People don't want to change because it works.
So the problem with subsidies, I think, is that it's always money related. While you are also having other KPIs, such as,
Yes.
for instance, less CO2.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Is there some way of that the UAE has also embedded those KPIs
It's starting to happen, and I mean, any business anywhere in the world, the motive or the objective for a business is to make money and to make profit. And until more recently, they have done that in whatever way they can, ignoring the environmental, social, and economic aspects. What we're seeing more recently in certain countries around the world, South Africa, France, for example, is mandatory reporting of non-financial information as well as financial information. So if the report card that the company has to put on the table is both financial and non-financial, you can't hide things as easily anymore. And if you're running a business in the wrong way, it becomes very evident based on the results that you're publishing every year. Here in the UAE, we haven't had mandatory non-financial reporting yet. But what we do have, of course, is the UAE and other countries in the regions have signed up to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and the governments in the region have to report back to the UN. Every 2 years, they need to produce a progress report. And of course, for the government to have a progress report, the companies need to do something so that they have information to give to the government, which it can then report.
And I understand that also that's where EY comes in, because you can help the companies develop these non-financial reports.
Correct, exactly. So,
Okay.
I mean, companies need to go through a journey, just like countries go through a journey. Companies need to look at their strategy. They need to start reporting so they understand what they're doing and they can identify opportunities for improvement. They then make those opportunities for improvement, and then you report again and you see if you've improved, and the strategy then sets a roadmap to say, where am I trying to get to? So if I'm starting here and I want to get to here, and I take a snapshot every year of my reporting, am I getting closer or am I moving further away, and what do I need to do?
So do you think that this transparency basically can also trigger the change in the world? I mean, there's a lot of non-financial reports about either corruption or about CO2, but do people really then intervene?
Well, this is an interesting question, and again, it's human nature that I think we struggle with. There's a lot of data and information that's available in the world today. But what people are less good at is deciding which data is true and real and which is fake and which is greenwash and things like that. And having more information out there is good, but you also need the analysis and the context to make sense of it, to decide whether it's something that you will act on or whether it's something you don't believe and don't do anything about. So what's required is not just more reporting and more transparency, but also that extra layer that provides the confidence around the information that's being presented.
Yes, and I can imagine that information, you can use it or not, you can ignore it or not. Yeah. But if we talk about Ernst & Young, they are an accounting colleagues from you, from your company. I guess that they are also auditing the non-financial figures. Is that true?
In some countries where it's mandatory. So we do some of that here, but it's voluntary. So there is no regulation here that requires companies to have their non-financial numbers, or to produce non-financial numbers, or to have them audited. In France there is, for example. So here we do it for some companies that voluntarily come forward and say, as an extra level of disclosure and communications with our stakeholders and investors, we give them this extra degree of confidence in the numbers that we're producing. At some point that will become mandatory everywhere because of the impact locally in countries if governments don't focus on that. Companies will do whatever they can, and they don't care.
Is it going fast enough?
No.
Because
people
we're
resist.
Talking about a couple of companies in the Western world. Yeah. But that's by far...
Again, it's human nature. If I'm asking you to change, you're going to wait until the last minute to change. Either I have to penalize you, so you have to pay me money, or you go to jail or something else, and then you will do something. But you will wait until the last minute to change. So and that's one of the problems.
You're also suggesting that there should be something that triggers human nature to adapt.
Exactly. One simple example, which doesn't cost very much for the government, is to make it mandatory for all companies to report on non-financial indicators. Yeah. So if you want to be listed on a stock exchange, you need to produce a non-financial report. Okay, it's extra costs for the company, which they won't like, but it's a pay-to-play type arrangement. If you want to be on the stock exchange, you need to publish results. Yeah. Yeah. And that's been very effective in other countries around the world.
Yeah. Interesting, because it means that the world is becoming more transparent. Companies
uniform, more unified in a way. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have a way of measuring, you have a way of checking, and then there comes the way of implementing the change. And let's hope that not only through your consultancy, but also through the wish of the governments and the public opinion, that also will change, so that the actual change of
Yeah.
maybe human nature will also
Yeah,
happen.
there's one other ingredient we need, and the global accounting policies have been around for a long time. So there's a standard way to calculate financial numbers. We're still in the early days of having one standard way of calculating non-financial numbers. That's urgently needed. If we can introduce that, then there is one way for all companies around the world to do it, and then the pace will increase as well.
I think you have a nice job ahead of you.
I have lots of work left to do.
Good. Thank you, Gus, for
Thank you very much.
talking to
Nice
us
to meet
here
you.
at the Transparency House. I see a lot of relations between Transparency House and EY in this sense. We will now be waiting for our next guest, and I will be back to you live. And please follow us on YouTube and at www.transparencyhouse.com.